This way, Mrs. Urquhart.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. This is Mayor Olive Urquhart addressing you for the last time on this program as Mayor of the City of Pointe Claire.
With the odds stacked up against her as a female in politics, Olive Urquhart took the 1950s by storm. By becoming a mayor in 1954, the planning of Pointe Claire's future had begun. She was not only the first female mayor in Pointe Claire, but arguably the mayor that took the fragmented little town that could and molded it into the city that it is today.
50s were an interesting period. Tremendous expansion and tremendous belief in the future. Confidence in the future was interesting.
Much of the Pointe Claire that you see today was the vision of a very specific group of individuals from a very specific period in time. It was the 1950s. The war was over, the baby boom was happening, and the concept of suburbia was at the doorstep of every major urban center across North America.
I think they had to have had just like a really clear vision. Like, you have to be visionary to be able to do that kind of changes and advancement.
Much of that era was led by an individual who did not want her town to be just another suburban town of Montreal. She wanted her town of Pointe Claire to become a self-sufficient, self-reliant, self-sustained city. The city of Pointe Claire.
The formation of the city of Pointe Claire from the parish of Pointe Claire was largely due to the leadership of Mayor Urquhart at the time.
Before serving 2 terms as mayor and 2 terms as alderman, or councillor as we refer to it today, Olive Urquhart was a housewife living with her husband Thomas and son Glenn in Valois. They had moved in 1935, and this is what Pointe Claire looked like at that time.
I mean, women generally were expected to and constrained to fit into certain occupations that were deemed suitable or that were indeed open to women.
But that doesn't mean she didn't seize the opportunity to immerse herself in the community in any way she could. She volunteered at the local school, at other various organizations. She was also the president of the nursery. And it came to a point in 1950 where she wanted to be involved at a municipal level, understanding that having a hand in shaping the community began there.
The saying that we deserve the government we get was never truer than of municipal elections.
Olive decided to run for alderman, seat 3 Valois, just before Christmas of 1950, for reasons as simple as she put it, naturally being interested in my community. The local paper reportedly was ecstatic about the idea of having a female run for a political position, a mere 10 years after women got the right to vote in Quebec. They called it history in the making, and it wouldn't have done in our father's time to break precedent and attempt an invasion of what has now been completely a man's domain.
Well, you see, once they realized that you knew what you were doing, they respected you. The same thing happened with Mrs. Urquhart. She was very good. She was much brighter than a lot of the men around, so they accept her.
And accept Olive they did. She won with quite the landslide, swamping her opponent in a shower of votes.
In the municipal field, the humblest of government forms, whatever happens at City Hall is a direct or indirect reflection of the will of the people.
For the 2 terms Olive was councillor, the population grew from close to 8,500 in 1951 to just over 10,000 in 1953. Our school system boomed with the opening of Valois Park and the Protestant School Board registering its 1,000th child in 1952. And it was decided that the water and sewage systems needed an upgrade after the enteritis epidemic of 1950. It became clear to Olive that Pointe Claire was trying to sustain itself on the previous generation's town layout. She knew that the whole town needed an upgrade, from education to water filtration.
She just had such a clear vision, and I think when you have a clear vision, everything is possible.
She was the type of person that you would have described if you wanted and were looking for someone to be the first woman mayor of the city of Pointe Claire. I think she was an ideal fit. Well-educated, flexible, determined.
And determined she was, spending her first council meeting as mayor in 1954 reciting a list of what she felt should be the council's top priorities. And on that list were two items that are still with us today. First, the creation of a new town hall, one that represented the potential of the city she knew Pointe Claire should be, and more importantly, in a location that proved to the citizens that Pointe Claire was destined to be more than just a lakeside town. The second item on the list, the creation of the position of town manager.
There was Mr. LaBrosse at the time, who was very active, and Mrs. Urquhart was the mayor.
And the position proved necessary as the population continued to increase, as did the number of services provided by the city, like adding fluoride to the town's drinking water. But this was only the beginning.
If we look at the truth, we must admit that for many years we have been nothing more than a dormitory suburb, a pleasant one for sure, but primarily existing as a place in which to live and not to work.
Olive's vision was to create a place that provided jobs for her citizens, schools for their children, and parks for their recreation. The industrial park was that big step to create a self-sustained, self-sufficient, self-reliant eventual city.
The creation of an industrial park, that was a new concept for municipalities.
To create industry, to create commerce, so that they could be taxed at a more exorbitant rate to subsidize and pay for the residential taxes. So it's a revenue-generating exercise.
In 1955, a new piece of land was annexed from the remaining lots owned by the parish of Pointe Claire. A total of 1,650 acres were designated to the industrial park. In other words, 36% of Pointe Claire as a whole was going to be zoned as industrial. So naturally, the citizens were concerned how this would affect the 50-plus-year tradition of Pointe Claire's status as a garden city. Mayor Olive Urquhart sensed the concerns of her citizens and responded with transparency, meeting their exaggerations head-on.
It appears to be an impression among some of our residents that we are creating a Charles Dickens monster of smoky darkness and endless chattering wheels and possibly even the return of child labor. There seems to be a widespread belief that this monster is about to swallow the pleasant serenity of our residential community.
To stay in line with the Garden City, the industrial park was strictly open to light industry companies that do not generate odors or dust or noise, like cute little Avon or Procter & Gamble. Plus, these companies had to follow strict aesthetic guidelines. The building had to be modern in appearance, no more than 2 stories in height, parking had to be in the back, green space had to be in the front, and most importantly, no neon lights.
Usually, if the mayor is progressive, things work out very well.
By the time Olive was in her second term as mayor, after serving as councillor again between 56 and 58, the industrial park she had fought so hard for was finally taking off. And at the top of the minutes of her first day of office as mayor again on Monday, February 10th, 1958 at 8:15 p.m., Pointe Claire was officially referred to as the City of Pointe Claire. Finally, Olive's vision was taking shape. Schools were built, residential areas, recreational areas, waste management, water filtration, commercial buildings, and the anticipation of a brand new highway was in the horizon. All as a response to the influx of the residents choosing Pointe Claire as their home, as well as to accommodate a steady population growth as the industrial park continued to attract employment for their light industry.
We in Pointe Claire have much to offer, more perhaps than any other lakeshore municipality. Let us examine our assets. We have an attractive community in which to live overlooking a lake that may someday be clean as well as beautiful. We have fine schools and parks and swimming pools and sporting facilities, including a yacht club, a golf course, a curling club. We have a rapidly growing industrial park, which is attracting some of the finest light industry in Canada. All in all, we have a very well-planned and prosperous community. By no means perfect, perhaps, but a long, long way from being undesirable.
She had to have amazing persuasive powers. She had to be able to get people to really give her the time of day. She made her terms pay off. I would love to be able to say I did even one of those things.
Almost exactly 10 years ago, I entered politics in this city. And since that time, it has been my privilege to serve 2 terms of office as mayor. It has been my greater privilege to participate in the growth of this community.
In 1961, Olive decided her mandate was done. She was satisfied with the growth of the city, and when asked if she would run again, she responded, "Definitely not running." Olive was in Pointe-Claire politics for 10 years, and in that time, Pointe-Claire went from this to this. Let me remind you, in 1951, the population of Pointe-Claire was 8,600 residents, and by 1961, the population exceeded 22,000. What's the population of Pointe-Claire now?
33,000 and growing.
I hope I may be forgiven for recalling some of the things which happened to bring this change about in the last 10 years. Not from personal pride, but from the pride in Pointe-Claire, and as a tribute to the many men and women who contributed so much.
She was a very intelligent lady and very active and energetic.
No, you don't have to attribute it to her uniquely, of course, but she was at the helm.
The accomplishments of any team, whether it's a basketball team or a baseball team or a political team, the aspects of that are a combination of leadership and support for that leadership, and Olive Urquhart was a good leader.
She was so far ahead of the curve on the industrial park, Stewart Hall, Lakeshore General.
I am impressed and I'm in awe that she was able to make such big changes in Pointe-Claire.
Her vision of a city was a place where people lived, where they worked, where they played, where they did business. And that was her vision, and Pointe-Claire is the result of that vision.
These are some of the highlights of the past 10 years. But what of the future? This lies in your hands, ladies and gentlemen, because this is your city. Thank you.